G'day, How to Dad here to tell you that being a dad is messy. Luckily, the new concentrated Purex has more power per drop to fight more loads of tough stains, like the sticky finger stain, the who put that there stain, bummer. The daddy's a canvas stain, how avant-garde. And obviously the daddy needs his bottle too stain. Cheers. Purex, the smart way to do laundry.
Going to be starting in just a couple of minutes. Enjoy the music a little longer. Oh, hello, and welcome, folks, to the Ferguson Library Presents Introduction to Microsoft Excel, or Basic Microsoft Excel. So tonight we're going to be looking at the basics of using Microsoft Excel. The first off, I'd just like to apologize for the cancellation of the class Tuesday night. We were supposed to do Introduction to Microsoft Word. Unfortunately, due to the tropical storm that hit us last week, I was without internet. So obviously my internet connection has been restored now, and so we are able to continue. If you are interested in taking the Introduction to Microsoft Word or Basic Microsoft Word class, it is going to be offered again in September. Actually, likely it's going to be offered September 1st, so it's not going to be that far away. So look for that September 1st, 7 p.m., the same time as these classes here, because I'm thinking this is actually working really well. With that said, let's get into kind of just, first of all, I'm going to look into taking the class here on YouTube, kind of what you can do to kind of follow along, as well as kind of participate and ask me questions. So in order to start following along, if you want to follow along with your own Microsoft Excel program on your computer, what I do recommend actually is going and downloading the handout from the website, and I'll be showing the handout, the website. You can actually see the link right up here, actually the address to the website. You can go and get the handout there, and I'll actually show the website to show you where you can get that on there. There's a handout, and then there's also an exercise file that we'll be using later on in the class. And so what I tend to do in these classes is I will go through and demonstrate kind of what I'm showing, and then I'll probably repeat that, and then I will usually give you 3 or 4 minutes, depending on how long I think it will take, to go off and do it on your own. And it's a good time to come in and ask questions. If you're having trouble doing it there, ask a question and I'll walk through it again. But that's usually kind of the time so that you're able to kind of follow along and do the exercises in your own Excel. Tonight I am using Excel 365, part of Office 365. This is the pretty much very close to Office 2019. So if you're using Office 2019, it's going to be very similar to Office 365 that I'm using here. Both of them are still very close to Office 2016 and Office 2013, earlier versions of Office that has Excels. If there's anything that I'm demonstrating in this class that does not match up on your own version of Excel, please let me know in the chat, and what I'll do is I will try to find the way to describe it so that you can actually match it in your own version. Everything that we're doing in this class will be available in all versions of Microsoft Excel going back to Excel 2007. Actually, since this is basic, probably even earlier than that there, but most people aren't using that in that. So let me first come over here and show you the website where we have our class resources. So this is the website here. This is fergusonlibrary.org/online-tech-classes. Right up here at the top, we have the upcoming class schedule. And so you can see here's tonight's class, the basic Microsoft Excel. Next week on Tuesday, I am going to be doing basic Microsoft PowerPoint. Next Thursday, I'm going to be doing a class looking at online learning resources that the Ferguson Library offers. So we've just brought in we've brought in actually a couple new online learning resources, plus some stuff that we've had before. So this is going to kind of be kind of an introduction to ways that you can kind of expand and continue your learning in whatever you want to learn on there. We have a wide variety of things. The final class here, Learn How to Live Stream Online, is basically me teaching what I'm doing right now. Taking my computer here and broadcasting it out to all of you here on YouTube, but also to other different kind of platforms, whether it be Facebook or Twitch or any of the other ones that are out there. So it's looking at using the free broadcasting software. So that's going to be Tuesday, August 25th, also from 7 to 9. All of these classes are from 7 to 9 p.m. So continuing that there, after you've come to this page here, which is fergusonlibrary.org/online-tech-classes, you want to come down and click on the tab for Basic Microsoft Excel. And down here, and then you scroll down a bit further, there are the 3 different links that are available here. The first one is the handout for this class. And so if you download this here, you're going to get a PDF that looks like this. So this is the handout. It's a 2-page handout. The first page has just a little bit of information about the ribbon, which I'll be talking about as we go into the class, some basic stuff on formulas, and then the next page is going to have some of the exercises that we're working. Unfortunately, I'm going to tell you, I'll talk about this a little bit later at the end of the class, but also just disregard the lynda.com stuff, actually. We are no longer providing access to lynda.com, and I have not had the opportunity to update my handouts yet. So that is something that will come true. We do have a new service, and I will talk about that when I get to that point in the class. So I highly recommend download the handout here for the basic reference kind of things that are available on here, as well as the exercises that we're going to be working on here. But I'll be walking through all the different exercises and helping you if you have any questions about that. Going back to the webpage, the second one here is this formulas worksheet. This is an Excel file, so it's going to download as an XLSX file. And what this is just a generated spreadsheet that we're going to be using when we're practicing working on formulas later on when we get to that point in the class. Finally, we have the link to our project outcome survey. Project outcome is the tool that we use for assessment in our classes. And I ask you to, at the end of this class, follow the link here, or the link will be on the screen as well too. Follow that address and complete a survey about your experience taking this class. So with that said, let's get into what we're doing with Microsoft Excel. So what is this class going to cover? Here, so what are we going to cover in this class? Also, the other thing I just realized I needed to is that what you're seeing is a few seconds behind me actually presenting. So if you ask a question I will not respond immediately. I will see your questions in the chat, and I will stop and answer them when I think it's a good point to stop, or there's a good opportunity, or if it's something that I need to kind of go back to at that point to kind of clarify if something's not clear. So I am keeping an eye on the chat. If you have questions or comments, please send them there so I'm able to see them and interact with you. That said, what are we going to be doing here in Basic Microsoft Excel? So by the end of this class, you're going to be able to complete the following skills in Microsoft 2016 and Microsoft Excel 365. We're going to look at how to open, save, and create new Microsoft Excel worksheets. We're going to become familiar with the Microsoft Excel interface and terminology. So some of the things that when you start using Excel, some of the kind of the terminology that you need to use. Excel is a little bit of a specialized program, so it has its own kind of unique vocabulary. We're going to look how to enter and edit data in Microsoft Excel, in an Excel worksheet. That is the foundation of what Excel is for, and so we're going to look at how to do that. That's the basics there. We're going to look at how to select data in an Excel worksheet. We're going to look at creating charts or graphs. We're going to look at just the basics of how to create a chart or graph, and kind of the different kind of charts and graphs you can do. We're not going to go really deep into it and all the different kind of things you can do with the charts and graphs. I encourage you to do your own exploration in this way. But I'm going to introduce you how to do it in the current versions of Excel. And finally, we're going to look at the basics of writing formulas. Formulas are one of the things that are at the heart of Excel, and they can be really simple, as some of the ones that we'll be looking at in this class. They can also be really complex. We're just going to be looking at the basics of creating formulas here. Some of our future classes that we're going to have, we have an intermediate Excel class. Looks a little bit further into writing formulas, not much, but there is a little bit of things in there. But it's another area that you can explore, and you can look through our Ferguson Library learning resources to kind of continue learning on that there. So let's go into we'll do a tour of Excel. The Excel file here, and let's move back to the demo screen. So here we are. So when you first open up Excel, this is usually the screen that will greet you. This is what's called the Backstage View in Microsoft Excel. Actually, this is the Backstage View in all of the Microsoft Office programs. So if you hear or see the terminology that says the Backstage View, what it really is it's this kind of like introductory interface that Microsoft Office will give you to access either creating a new file or working with templates or recent files, as well as accessing a lot of the kind of the file menus over here. The Backstage View is available by clicking. Actually, we'll get that when we get into like the ribbon. When I go into the ribbon, I'll show you how to get back to this view here. So some of the things that you can do here in the Backstage View is you can see right up here, we can create a new blank workbook. This is usually the place that you will start when you are working in Microsoft Excel, is that you will go and click blank workbook. Unless you are looking to work with some of the templates on there. So there's different templates. Templates are actually covered in our intermediate Excel class, which will be offered towards the end of September. So we do cover templates in there, but they basically allow you to kind of use some more, not have to build some of the more complex functions in Excel. Somebody else has already done that there, but you can adapt and adjust them to your own use. So that's those are templates there. You have your recent files down here, so things that you've opened recently will show up. So you can see I do a bunch of stuff in Excel, and so I have a bunch of different files opened up here. Especially since I've been working on stats for different things. We do a lot of the stuff in Excel in the library. Over here on the left, we have kind of a new navigation toolbar. So right now we're in the home. You can see this here by this little bit darker green view. If I come down to new, I get my new options. So here's my new blank workbook, and then here are all the different templates that we have available on there. We have available right now. There are a lot of templates out there. You can see I can do a search for finding, so you can usually kind of find whatever you specifically need. The open will allow me to open up a file that I already have on the computer. So this is if I'm already in Excel and I want to open up a file, and so I'm not like double clicking the file in Windows Explorer. I'm just and it opens right up into Excel. This is me opening up something, browsing and opening up something specific. Moving down, we have our info. This provides information about the worksheet that we're working with. A Microsoft Excel file is known as a worksheet, or is known as a workbook. Sorry about that. It's actually known as a workbook, and the workbook is made of different worksheets. And when we actually start looking into Excel, I'll kind of point out the difference on kind of what that exactly means. But you can see over here, we can do like protection, so you can like password lock your spreadsheet. You can decide what kind of changes. So you might be able to say, okay, they can only work on certain fields, or they can only work on certain worksheets in there. Things like checking for issues to make sure that there's nothing broken in your workbook on there. Version history, so when you make changes to something, if you realize you made a lot of changes, you can actually go back to different versions. These are kind of new things that they've kind of added into Microsoft Excel over time. Over here, you have some basic information, so things like the size of the file, the title. Since I haven't created a file or saved it yet, this information isn't filled in yet. But it'll also talk about like who's the author. You can add other related things on here and such. Office 2016, Office 365, Office 2019, the newest versions of Office that are out there. They have a major collaborative function to them, and they also have a major online function to them. So you can see, like, I'm actually signed into my my Microsoft account up here, and it's kind of connected to that. So these files allows you to kind of work easier with other people and kind of make sure all the credit and all that kind of thing too. Save, obviously, is save the file that we're working on. Save as. You'll notice when I click save, it automatically went down and selected save as. And the reason for this here is, this happens in every Microsoft Office program, is that because I have not saved the file yet, the first time that you save a file, it's always a save as. And save as basically means that you get to choose what the name is and where it gets saved. From that point on, if you ever click save, it will go back to that same file name, that same location on your hard drive. If you ever wanted to save it as a different save it as a different file from one that you've saved before, you can then go back to save as and choose a new location and a new file name. Print is printing, obviously. Didn't find anything to print because I haven't created a spreadsheet yet. Some of the stuff here doesn't make sense until you actually have a spreadsheet created. Share. Oh, okay, yeah, we're not doing that. Share allows you to go and share it through like OneDrive or through other kind of different sharing mechanisms on there. Export allows you to save it to a different file type, something we're not really getting into the class. Publish does some things, again, business intelligence. If you get a lot more familiar and comfortable with Excel, this might be something that you're looking into right now. It's beyond the scope of this class. Close, obviously, is close. So what we're going to do now, continuing our tour of Microsoft Excel, I'm going to go back to new, and I'm going to create a new blank workbook. So click on this once, and so when you first open up Excel, a brand new Excel workbook, actually create a second. Okay, here we go. When you create a brand new Excel file and you click new, this is what you're greeted with. You're greeted with your work area here. The work area is this big section right here with all these little this grid of boxes. Each box is what's known as a cell. And each cell has a specific address told by the columns. The columns are all labeled by letters. What I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in. It's a little easier to read on screen. There we go. We're going to about 200%. So now you can see a little bit better here. We have our columns, A, B, C, D, and so on. These are your columns. The rows are numbered 1 down to infinity. Don't make an infinity-sized spreadsheet, please. You will crash your computer. You'll crash Excel. It will not be happy. But you can go down pretty far. I mean, I've worked with 4,000 row spreadsheets before. So each cell has a specific address. So you can see this one here that I have selected right up here in the top left corner. The address here says A1. If I go and click over here, this is D6. And so you can see right up there, D6. And so knowing those cell addresses there is important because you'll need that for writing things like formulas or selecting different cells. is you have to know those addresses for those different cells, because what happens is that you don't actually, when you write things like formulas, you don't actually refer to what's inside the box. So like if I had the number 5 entered in here, if I were writing a formula, I could say, okay, this is going to be 1 plus 5. That's fine. But what happens if sometime, and this is getting a little bit ahead, but what sometimes in the future that number 5 needs to change? I need to change it to, say, a 4. My formula, if I wrote it as 1 plus 5, is always going to be the same. It's always going to equal 6. But if I write a formula that says 1 plus C2, then what happens is that it will take whatever the value inside C2 is and add it to 1. So like right now, if I do 1 plus 5, I'm obviously going to get 6. But if I do 1 plus C2, it will be 1. It will still get me 6 right now. But if C2 changes to a different number, like it goes to 4 or something, this will then automatically change the result of the formula that I write. So we'll get to that when we write formulas there, but that's just kind of the key about knowing the address of the cell that you're working on. We want C2 or B5, whatever they are. Up at the very top of our window up here, we have what's known as the ribbon. So the ribbon is Microsoft Office's interface, what they call an interface, how you interact and access the different functions and features and tools that Microsoft Excel gives you to work with your data in your worksheet. This was something that got introduced in Microsoft Office 2007. Kind of derided when they first kind of introduced it there, but people have gotten used to it, and at this point, I quite like it. The home tab, the ribbon is made up of a bunch of different tabs, and you can see that right up here in the top, we have a home, insert, page layout, formulas, data, and so on. We have the different ones there. The home tab is going to be kind of a lot of your most common tools that you'll be using. So things like copy and paste over here at the clipboard, your font controls, alignment. So are you going to go left alignment, or are you going to go right alignment? You can see when I entered this number here, because a number automatically goes always to the right side of the cell, whereas text, if I put in text here, you can see it stays over on the left side. But if I wanted to, I could put this over on the right. I could put it in the center. I could put it over to the left. However I want to do that there. Wrap text. Wrap text basically means that if the text that I write is longer than the width of the box, it will go down to a new line automatically. Otherwise, it'll just kind of keep running over. But if I put something into the cell next to it, it'll get cut off. Merge and center allows you to kind of do some fun things. I'm not going to go into the depth of every single tool here on the Microsoft Excel ribbon, but I do encourage you to go in and experiment with these on your own after the class. Numbers, what type of numbers are we working with? We have formatting and styles, conditional formatting. This is something that gets covered in our intermediate Excel class, so if you're interested in kind of finding out about this here, look forward to that class. I believe it's going to be offered calendar here. You can see the calendar coming up right behind my head. We're looking at, it's probably going to be September 29th is I think when I actually schedule it. There might be some changes in case something comes up with library programming, but right now it's looking like September 29th will be the intermediate Excel. This class will be repeated on September 22nd, both of those from 7 to 9 p.m. We have the tools over here to insert or delete cells or rows, some editing kind of things. Moving over, we have our insert tab. This allows you to insert different things into your worksheet. So things whether you're going to put in pictures or shapes. This is also where we find things like charts. So when we are looking at creating charts, we'll be coming back to this area here, and this is where we'll be able to create those kind of things. Page layout allows you to do the settings for if you're going to be printing your spreadsheet, how it shows up on the page. Printing from Excel can be complicated and a little bit difficult, so this might be something that you end up playing around with a lot, checking the print preview and seeing whether or not it works the way that you want it to do. We're not going to really spend a lot of time on this here in the class. Moving through formulas, we'll come back to this later on in the class. Data allows you to start working with your data. Again, this is an area that we deal with a lot in the intermediate Excel class, so something to look forward to then. Review is useful when you're working with other people in Microsoft Excel, allowing you to kind of send comments or show changes that are happening, while also being able to go like undo changes. There's a lot of different things. You can protect the worksheets in here. So those are some of the basics here on the ribbon. Some other parts of the interface kind of coming down here on the very bottom. We have a little tab here that says Sheet 1. So as I mentioned before, a Microsoft Excel file is known as a workbook. And just like any other book that we work with, the workbook is made up of a lot of different worksheets. So there are worksheets inside the workbook. And so down here, we currently have one worksheet, and this little plus sign right here and such, I can click this here and create a second worksheet. And you can see it looks, well, this was not zoomed out, but if I zoom into that 200%, it'll look exactly the same as the one that we just did, except it doesn't have my things entered into there. So you're able to have like a bunch of different like sheets with a bunch of different data on them, such, all tied into the same file. And you can have, I mean, you can do a whole bunch of different worksheets here. What I usually find worksheets very useful for is that if I say have a bunch of data entered here in my first worksheet, and I need to do some things with like a small part of that data. What I'll generally do is I'll copy and then that data and I'll go paste it into a new worksheet, and I can do whatever I need to over there without affecting everything that's happening in my first worksheet. So I can delete things, I can rearrange things, I can do formulas, I can do whatever I need to do in that new paste or that new copy of the data over here. And then if anything goes wrong or I need to go back, I can always just then go right back to my first worksheet. So I usually sometimes find it's useful if I need to say add up a whole bunch of numbers, I can go over here, add them all up, and then I can take that number back to sheet 1 if I need to. So that's kind of the advantage of different worksheets. They allow you to just basically have a whole bunch of different spreadsheets that are all kind of linked together in the same file. Sometimes you might have you might have like one worksheet that might be like names and addresses, and you might have another one that's going to be names and phone numbers, or survey results, and the survey results all show up on different worksheets, or different surveys. There's tons of different ways that you can use the different worksheets in Excel. So let me see if there's anything else interface-wise I need to cover. Home tab, data, formulas. Okay, so yes. So suppose here I have created 6 different worksheets, and I don't want 6 different worksheets. I can always delete the worksheets if I right-click with my mouse on the worksheet. I get my right-click menu. That's one other thing when you're working with Microsoft Office that is useful, is always kind of take a chance to right click on things and kind of see what the menu gives you. Right clicking in Microsoft Office gives you what's called a context sensitive menu. So when I right click on the sheet tab down here, I'm going to get a different menu than if I right click on the cell over here. So you can see I have a much different menu over here. So the right click menu will change based on what you were right clicking. Come down here, I don't want to keep this here, I can just come up and do delete. And so we're just going to delete a bunch of these here. And then we're going to do a quick look at what's in this menu here. You can see there's insert. So I can right click, I can insert in a new worksheet. So I can insert some things into there. That's the insert on there. Delete, we just looked at, can delete the things. I can also rename my worksheets. So it's useful because when you have sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3, 4, that doesn't mean anything to you. I mean, you might keep in your mind, okay, yeah, sheet 1 has all this data about business number 1, and sheet 2 has all this information about business 2. But I could also just go in, and if I right click on the sheet tab and go to rename, I can then just type in business 1. And then over here, I can type in and I go in and do business 2. And not only does that benefit you, because you don't have to remember, okay, sheet 1 was business 1, sheet 2 was business 2, but if you ever share that spreadsheet with anyone else, they will know what those different those different spreadsheets, those different worksheets are as well too. They're not going to sit there and like, wait, what's 1, what's 2, what's in this information here? So it's usually a kind of a good practice if you're using multiple worksheets in Microsoft Excel to name them as you're working with them, just to kind of for your own benefit and for the benefit of anyone else who might be using the data that you're creating. We actually already went through the file menu. So I mentioned before, once you're in your spreadsheet, how do you get back to the Backstage view? If you notice up here on the ribbon right next to the Home tab, there is a File menu. If I click File, it takes me back to the Backstage view, and for here, I have access to my save and my print, as well as open. You have access to all the different kind of tools you have. If you want to go back, I could just click the back button here and it takes me back. So once again, I'm going to show that. Go to File. You have access to the Backstage view. Click the back button up here in the top left corner, or hit Escape on your keyboard, and it will take you back to your view here. So, are there any questions about anything here that we are doing in kind of our tour of Excel? I'm just going to wait a few seconds to wait for the stream to catch up and give you a chance to ask any questions, and then I will continue. Right, not seeing any questions. So we are going to continue into actually now starting to use Microsoft Excel, the basics of using Microsoft Excel. I just want to point out that if you see me looking up to the corners of the screen, either this way or this way on there, the reason is I have a couple different monitors and kind of different things that I'm using to keep track of the status of the stream. I'm seeing the chat, I'm seeing my stream over here, just kind of making sure that everything is working well for you. So that said, let's look at starting to enter data into our spreadsheet. So you will notice in our exercise file, if you have the handout and you go look at the handout, the first exercise here was we have this table here for Big W supermarket sales. So we're going to actually work on copying this table into Microsoft Excel. So I'm going to go through and copy and actually enter in the data that's in this table here. A table, using more Excel terminology, a table is a group of data in Excel. On a worksheet, go back here. So I have our worksheet here. A worksheet, you can actually have a bunch of different tables on there. So a bunch of different groupings of data. I tend to actually kind of limit myself to like one table per worksheet, and I'll create new worksheets if I have other tables, especially if they're really big. But for a small table like this here, like this small Big W supermarket sales, you could have several of them here on the same worksheet, and Excel is smart enough to actually kind of treat them a little bit individually. That said, let's look at starting to enter in data. So the first line that we have on our handout here is actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to this over here, and we're going to do this over here, so you can see them side by side as I'm working on them. And I can also see them side by side. So we have our table here on our exercise, and what we're going to do, there's a little bit more space in our Excel file. There we go. Now we can see, here's our table that we're creating over here, and we're going to create it right over here. So the first thing we're going to do is we have this title here, Big W Supermarket Sales. Now, if you notice, this bar, here, let me zoom in to make this. Yeah, there we go. Get a little larger, a little bit easier to read. You can see actually this here kind of what they call spans. It kind of spans across several cells. You can actually see the different cells underneath. This actually goes across 3 different cells. So how do we do that? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to come up here to A1, which is our first top left cell in our spreadsheet. And I'm going to type in big, capitals, Big W, supermarket sales. Now you can see as I'm typing, it starts going outside of the cell. It starts going over the other cells. Now when I click, you can see it's still visible. Now remember what I was talking before about like the wrap text. If I go over here to B1 and I start typing some more text, you can now see this actually covers up and actually cuts off Big W supermarket sales over here. So there's a couple different things you can do when your text is too long for the cell that you're working in. One of them is you can make the cell larger. So if you notice, when I move my mouse in between columns A and column B, right at the edge, like right in the center there and such, my cursor changes to this line with two arrows pointing in opposite directions. What this cursor means that I am able to resize the cell. So if I click and I start dragging, you can see actually I am making the A cell larger, and I can drag this say all the way over to here. And so now everything in A, all the way down here, is now larger, and it just moved everything else over. I can make it smaller too if I wanted to go this way, and I can make everything smaller. Now I could do this here if I wanted to make everything fit into place here, but you'll notice over here, my leftmost column on my table over here on the right here is still the same size. So somehow I've made this one cell larger than all the ones underneath of it. So how do I do that? First, I'm going to undo. And so whenever you're working in Excel, when you're ever working in almost any Microsoft Office program, the undo function is your best friend. So if you make a mistake, you do something you didn't mean to, don't panic, undo. So you notice right up here on the very top, on the title bar, the green title bar up here and such, over here towards the left we have a little disk icon, which is our save. So this is an easy way, if I wanted to save my file, I can just come up here and click that there, and it'll save the file where it needs to go. Since I haven't saved this file before, this will automatically do a save as. It will allow me to choose a location and a file name. If I have saved the file before, you can see right now, because it says book 2 and it doesn't have like an extension, it doesn't say XLSX over there or whatever, it's telling me that this has not been saved before. Once this here says the name of the file, then it has been saved, and I click this here, it'll just automatically save it. I can also turn on autosave if I want to. I've been using computers long enough that it's a habit for me to be saving frequently, but if it's something that you do have you have problems with sometimes, that you find yourself losing work, it's useful sometimes to turn on autosave, and then it'll just kind of keep automatically saving it. But I'm getting kind of off onto a tangent here. Next to the save is this little leftward kind of rounded arrow pointing to the left here. This is the undo. Right next to it is its brother redo. Can't redo anything because we haven't undone anything. What that there is, if I click this once, it will start undoing actions, and I can keep undoing until I get back to the point that I want to have. So here it is. I've entered in the title for the first time. This is like when I first typed it in. It's entered it in. So now what I'm going to do is I want this here to actually, what they call, I want to merge these cells together so that they're actually one big cell. So A1 is actually going to be 3 cells wide. What I do is I select the cells, and I select the cells by clicking on the first, clicking and holding my mouse down on the first cell. So I'm clicking and holding, and then I'm dragging to the right 2 cells. And as you can see, as I'm dragging, it's selecting the cells. It's putting this green box around the cells that are selected. So this is something that you get used to in Excel, is that this kind of tells, okay, these are selected. These ones here are also gray because they're not the active, but they're in the selection. So it kind of, this whole section stands out from the rest of the worksheet. Once I've done that, and actually I'm going to just make this bigger so you can see, right up here there is a, in the ribbon on the Home tab, is a button that says Merge and Center. So if I click that there, what it'll do is it'll merge all those cells together. They're all still A1. All of this is A1. There no longer exists a B1 or a C1. From over here, I'm into D1. So what A1 did was it covered up B1 and C1, but it made this all one cell. And this. Get this resized. There we go. Oh, I did that a little too much. There we go. Okay, that works. We can see everything that's in the exercise and also see over here. So now you can see this here kind of matches both of those there. Now I'm going to continue with my data entry. So I'm going to go down this next line. The row 2 is empty. We're going to go down here to row 3, and we're going to put in product. And now now when I'm entering into the cell here, you can see I have my little flashing cursor. starting to enter data into Excel sometimes can be a little frustrating because if suppose I made a mistake, suppose I typed something different, suppose I typed deduct instead of product. One of our normal kind of inclinations is to use the arrow key to go back to fix that error. But if I hit the arrow key, you notice all of a sudden my little flashing cursor is gone. And that's because when you first start editing a cell, the arrow keys still what they call navigate between the cells. So what they'll do is if I hit up or down, it would have actually moved my selection up here or down there. So like up, down. In order for me to actually use the arrow keys inside the cell, I have to be in cell entry mode. And I can do that by clicking on the right up here with the formula bar. And this here allows me to, as you can see, as I'm moving left and right, I'm able to move my cursor left and right inside the cell. So I can go back to here and change the E to an O. Once I'm satisfied with what's inside the cell, I can either hit enter, and if I hit enter, you can see it takes me down to the cell below. If instead I finish typing in my cell, I hit tab instead, it takes me to the next cell to the right. Shift tab will take me to the cell to the left. So you want to be, so those are kind of the controls you kind of get used to as you're entering in Excel. That after you finish entering, if you want to go to the right, you'll hit tab and it'll go to the next cell. If you want to go down, you'll hit enter. Now, Excel also has kind of an interesting function that if I go through and enter in a bunch of things all the way across, and then I want to go down to the next line, I hit enter, it will actually then usually go down to the beginning of the line. I can go across. You will see that as I start entering in the other things. So let me go in and enter in, type in my other field. So there, I hit tab again to keep going to the right. 4, and then total sales. And now what happens is, since I'm at the end of the line, over here, I now want to go back to the beginning of row 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit enter. And you can see actually now is it took my selection and brought me all the way here. Didn't bring me back to A4. And the reason for that there is that when I started typing my line across, I started here in B. If I start here now in A4 and type across, I'm going to do apples, and then I'm going to do the set of 4 numbers here. When I hit enter, it will take me back down to A5. So these are just things, these tricks that as you spend time working in Excel, you'll get used to kind of the navigation and how different keys on your keyboard work. If you're uncomfortable with that right now, I do recommend kind of clicking so you can actually click to your next cell. It's a little bit slower, and over time you'll get used to using the keyboard more when you're working in Excel. I always recommend getting used to keyboard shortcuts and using things on the keyboard, because as you're doing if you're doing a lot of data entry, it slows you down having to pick up your hand, move it over to your mouse, move something around, and then move your hand back to the keyboard and continue typing. You're getting used to doing everything on the keyboard, hitting enter, hitting tab. You're able to kind of start working through things a lot faster. But it does take practice, it does take time, so don't expect to be able to do it immediately. Now here I am at the end of my line. I'm ready to go to the next line. I'm going to hit enter. Nope, and it didn't do it because I clicked. Remember I clicked? What I'm going to say right now, I'm going to continue entering in this table. If you are following along with these exercises, take a couple minutes, look at the handout here, go into your own copy of Excel, and copy this table on yourself there. I'm going to continue here. If you have questions, please leave them in the chat. I'll give about 2 minutes for everybody to kind of follow along and catch up. If you have questions, please leave them in the chat. I'll leave this up here so that you can see my table as well as the one, the handout exercise. one more minute, and then we will get back to continuing our exercises here. All right, so has everybody created their tables? I don't see any questions, so we're going to continue on. So we have, looking at our exercises here, we have duplicated the table in our blank worksheet. We've done that all here. And so this is business one. We could actually go down here and rename this here. And I'm going to right click on business one tab down here. We're going to call this big W. You can see now this worksheet now has a relevance, or it is tied in with data there. So somebody looking at this here can say, okay, that's big W supermarket. Sorry, getting hiccups. So our next exercise is we're going to try to find the total sum for apples, oranges, and pears sold. Obviously not grapes. I don't know why I don't have grapes on the exercise, but we're not finding the total for grapes, I guess. We will. Okay, so one of the things that Excel really excels at, unintended, is that it is its math functions. One of the things is that you can, a lot of people, myself included, use it as a super fancy calculator. So the idea that I have all of this data on here, and then I'm able to start working with the data. So I've entered in the data. So I've seen Q1, we've sold 521 apples, sold 519, 560. But I want to know what the total. I need to be able to add them together. So there's a couple different things that we can. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make this larger so that we can kind of see. You can see the ribbon when I have this on a smaller size. Back here. When I make this a smaller size, you can see the ribbon kind of, it starts losing some of its labels and kind of starts compressing things. It's really useful to be able to have the smaller screen to be able to work with things side by side. But unless you actually know what all of these different things mean, it can be kind of hard to find your place. So sometimes it's nice to just make everything big and be able to see all the different labels that are here. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to click here under my total sales column here under F. So on F4 for apples. You'll notice right up here on our ribbon, up here in the top right, under the editing section, is an Autosum. So if I click this here, what it will do actually is automatically select the cells next to it. Excel's gotten pretty smart with a lot of things. And so in this case here, we're just doing a very simple sum. And it will automatically create the sum formula. A little bit later on in this class, we'll look at writing this formula itself and how they actually got to this here. But for right now, I just hit Autosum and I hit Enter, and it will add it together here. I can now do that for each of my different columns here. I do Autosum, Enter, Autosum, Enter, Autosum, Enter. I get all of my, I get an error here. Formula. 4 to F5. Oh, hold on. This one actually summed the wrong thing. Autosum. Summing that instead. There's where, because now it had a couple different numbers up there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag that and tell it there. So you can see what I did was I clicked and I dragged across. And again, we'll be looking at this here when we write formulas. But yeah, that was just a little tricksy thing that happened. There's the sums. The other tool that you can use when you're working with kind of sums, if I'm trying to find, so I'm going to actually delete these. These are all my formula sums. Is suppose I want to put the sum here. What I can do again is, remember before when I can actually drag and select the cells. So I'm going to click and hold on the first cell of numbers here. So into B4, I'm going to drag this over to the right, and you can see I'm selecting. So this green box is going around the cells that I'm selecting. This one here is white because that's the active cell. You can see it's the active cell up here in the top left corner where it says B4. These ones here are the inactive cells inside the selection. Kind of throwing around a little bit of terminology there. Now, if we look down at the very bottom of the screen, right underneath my head down here, we have what's called the status bar. And if I move too far, I get my chart menu, so I have to be careful here. Down here we have, and you'll see actually on the status bar, it will give us 3 different things when we have numbers selected. This is another thing that Excel has been doing very well. It's kind of giving us answers for things. You can see it gives us the average, so it's giving us the average of these 4 numbers, 543.75. So it's automatically doing the math and saying, okay, it's going to add these numbers together, divide by 4. That's how you get an average. You add a bunch of numbers together, divide by that bunch of numbers, and you get an average, what the average number between that there is. Because they have found that people who do things in Excel, sometimes they want to be able to get these numbers quickly. They want to be able to add up numbers quickly, get the average quickly. The count, so the next one over, the count here, what that does is that counts the number of filled cells. What does that mean? Okay, so if we count the number of filled cells, so if I go here, let me just put a test here. Test, not test. Test. So if I go through and select all of these here, I'm actually selecting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows. But you can see down here, my count is 6. And the reason for that there is that one of my rows is blank. So the count will only give you the count of filled rows. It's a really useful thing that if you have like a whole list kind of going down, you can select it. So if I've selected all of these cells going down, my count is still 6 because there's only 6 filled cells in this column that I selected. All the blank ones do not count, hence the count. Let me go back to here. And so then the final number here is the sum. It will automatically get, so if I select a bunch of numbers, if I select all of these numbers, it will add them all together and give me the sum right down here. I don't have to write a formula. I don't have to try to calculate them any other way. I just have to select them. Here's the sum of these 2. It's 1040. Here's the sum of those 3. It's 1600. I don't have to do the math. It just kind of gives that to me in the status bar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this here. It says 2175. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to type in 2175. So this is another way that you get the sum of different things, whether I do the sum going down or the sum going right to left. Now, why would I? So here I type this in. So I can go in and I can add in the sum 1576 for this one. Over here, it's going to be 1353. This one is 918. So now I've entered all of these in. But what I just did is not really the best way to do a sum or a total sales or total field in Microsoft Excel. You do want to be able to use functions or formulas for that there. Why? The reason why is if I go into, say, Q3 and I realize that they made a mistake giving me the data, they didn't sell 560 units of apples. They sold 570 units of apples. If I go in here and type 570, good. I've changed this number here, but the total sales over here now is wrong. So, watch what happens when I work with a formula over here. We're going to go over here. I'm going to do my Autosum. I'm going to add that all together. I'm going to hit enter. So there's that same 2175. The same 2175 that we got by selecting this here, seeing this sum down here. It's the same number, but look what happens this time when I change the 560 here in Q3. So instead of 560 units of apples, they sold 570 units of apples. This number changed, and it fixed the sum over here. So this automatically changed based on the calculations over here. And that's where formulas in Excel really have their strength. That's where doing math like this here, or doing data analysis in Excel has its strengths, is that this formula here is not looking at the individual numbers. What it's doing is it's looking at cell B4 and taking the value that's in cell B4, and then it's looking at C4 and taking the value and then adding those together, then looking at D4 and looking at those values. It's not, whatever those values in there don't matter until it looks at that cell. And because it's looking at the address of the cell and not the content of the cell, when the content changes, this will also change. So that's one of the things that Excel will kind of really benefit for you. So what I'm going to do now, and so I'm going to show you another kind of neat little trick. We don't want to do like the manually typing in the sums over here. We want to do our little formulas. You can see it's a formula up here. It says the equal sum. Another really neat trick that you can do in Excel is I've done a sum of this row here. I've done from B4 to E4. Now I want to do the same thing here, B5 to E5. So you'll notice when I have this box selected, down in the bottom right corner down here is this little box. And if I put my cursor in Excel normally, if you look at it, is this little white cross on there. But when I put my cursor over that little box in that bottom right corner, it becomes a smaller black cross. The cursor in Excel changes based on kind of different things that you're able to do. So it's always worth kind of paying attention to what the cursor shape is, because it will tell you something that you do. This little small X cross allows me to do something like this. If I click and drag down, you can see I'm dragging the green box down the column, the other rows. When I let it go, it all of a sudden it filled in these columns here. And so what that did, this is kind of a neat, clever trick that Excel allows you to do, is by dragging that down, is if I look up here, it copies the formula. So the formula that I had before was equals sum and then a range of cells inside there. But what it did was it recognized that when it came down to here, that it was no longer in row 4. So it doesn't want to be looking at B4, C4, D4, E4. It rewrote the formula because it was on row 5 to do B5, C5, D5, E5. Same thing happened when I dragged it down to the next one here. Now it looked for E6, C6, D6, E6. And the same thing down here for 7. So when you have like a column, when you have like a table here and you want to do the whole column, you only need to write the formula once. Other than that, then you can just drag this down. There's also, if I double click on this, it will automatically fill it down to the end of the table there. But this isn't always that reliable, so I tend to lean towards dragging it like I did before. So clicking and dragging down to there and letting it go, because that gives me a little bit more control over what it works with. So, I mean, we're kind of jumping ahead talking about description. Actually, you know what we're going to do? I should rewrite the exercises here that we work on formulas and then go to the charts. So, now that we have done... so let's actually start working on formulas then. I'm kind of changing things up a bit. So what we're going to do, so we've looked at the basic, we've clicked this Autosum on there to look at formulas. But we're going to do a little bit more in depth of looking at how to write formulas and kind of what the different parts mean and kind of different ways that you can work with the formulas. So the first thing I want to do is I want to introduce you here to the formulas tab. So if we go back up to the ribbon at the very top, we come up here to formulas. I'm going to click on formulas, and this will bring me to the formulas tab. And so there's different things like being able to insert function. There are a lot. There are hundreds of different functions that you can do in Excel. They can either be Autosum. We've already looked at the Autosum kind of things. Recently used, this will keep track of the formulas that you've recently used before. Financial. If you're doing a financial document, this will allow you to do kind of financial functions. So things like, oh God, I'm not a financial person, so I can't even go in and talk about interest rate schedules, and a lot of the stuff is kind of built into there and such. This is way beyond anything I'm actually comfortable talking about. So just know that there are financial functions inside here. Logical functions. Logical functions are things like and, if. So if statements, if this or that, do this or not do that there. Ors. We're not going to go into this in this class. We're not going to go into this in the intermediate class, but it allows you to start building some like really complex like automation into Excel. Things like text. So if you're working with text, fields of text like names, or in this case here we have the text of the names of the fruits over here, addresses, those kind of things. Different ways to work with text. date and time, basically functions to work with time or dates. If you're adding dates, removing dates, there's a lot of kind of neat things you can do. Math and trig, there's a ton of different things that are all kind of available in there. So there's just a wide range of different functions you can do. Formula auditing, there's a bunch of things. There's too many things kind of go to in this case. We're going to go back to the home tab, but just so you know, the formula tab's there, and it's a good thing to kind of go in and explore and kind of try things out. I always encourage my students, try things out. If you don't be afraid of breaking anything or ruining your data. It's very hard to break Excel. You can't. It's not gonna break. If you do something and you end up messing up your data or losing data, you can always use the undo function. Otherwise, you can come up here and just over in the top right, just close it. It'll ask you if you want to save the file. Click no, and then you go open it up again, and it'll be back to where you were before you started working on it again. So don't be afraid of going in and playing around with things. I've given you a table here in your exercise. You can go in. It's a basic table that you can start doing a lot of different things with. Play around with that before you start playing around with your own data. So let's continue and start looking at how to write functions. So when you're writing a function formula, when you're writing a formula in Excel, you always start off with the equal key. So what I'm gonna do here is we're gonna come down here, and I want to do a sum of quarter one here. I want to do, just like I've summed all the Apple sales, I want to see what my quarter one sales are. I'm gonna come over here, and I want to put this total down here. And so I'm gonna start off writing my formula by typing the equals key. The equals key is up by usually next to your backspace key on your keyboard. And so the equals key is what tells Excel that what's going to follow after the equals key is a formula, and it's expecting you to do math. And so it'll start behaving a little differently than if you were just, say, typing in numbers or words into Excel. So now, once I've hit the equals key, I then have to enter a function. I have to choose which function I want. Now in this case, I want to do something very simple. I just want to add these numbers together. So I want the sum of these figures. What I'm going to do is I'm going to write sum. Now you can see as I start typing, it starts offering me suggestions. This is similar to like Google's auto suggest. When you start typing a search into Google, it will start giving you suggestions on how to finish that search that you're doing based on common searches that start with what you're starting with. In this case, it starts offering me the function. So if I start typing SU, you can see all the different SU functions that are available. You can see right over here is sum. I could finish just typing M, and because sum is such a short word, SUM, it's 3 letters, I tend to not even use this menu. I just equal sum and start working. But if you're uncertain of what the name of the function is, so I'll come here at SU, I can come over here and click sum. And you can see as I click on it, it gives me this little toolbar here, or it gives me this little tooltip that tells you what that function will do. So like substitute will replace existing text with new text in a text string. A lot of gibberish there, don't worry about that there. Subtotal returns a subtotal. Sum adds all the numbers in a range of cell. Hey, that's what we're looking for. So once I have it, I'm going to double click on it. Whoops. Hold on. I was too aggressive with my clicking. Okay, so I'm going to double click, and so now what happens is it fills in sum, and then it opens up this parentheses. So we're starting to see what the formula, what the pattern for writing a formula is. You always start off with an equal sign. You write the name of the function, and then usually you have to start offering what they call arguments inside the parentheses. Now you'll notice underneath the table now, it shows me, it's kind of giving me another tooltip that tells me how to write this function. So there's sum, there's the parentheses, and it tells me the first thing it wants is number 1, and then we have comma, number 2, comma, So what I can do at this point is I could do sum, and I could say do 521. As I say, that's the first one that I have here. Comma, and so now you can see now it's moved over, and now number 2 here is in bold, and so now it wants the second number that I enter. So I'm going to type in 376, comma, move it over to number 3. So I can go on and type in my four numbers, 521, 376, 300, 235. But again, I do not want to use but this is actually the wrong way to write this formula. What I actually want is, instead of 521 here, I actually want to instead of saying, okay, 521 is the number that's here in B4, but I want the formula to use the value of what's in B4. So what does that mean? It means that if B4 changes, like if I go in and change this from 521 to 421, the math down here will also change. If I just typed in 521 and then change this field here, it won't change this at all. But if I type in B4, so I'm going to type in B4 because I'm typing in actually the cell address. So now you can see B4, it shows up in blue down here, and then I have this blue box around my 521. And so that's kind of a little color coding to know kind of which cells you're referring to. So now I've told this formula in Excel that I want the sum of whatever's in B4, comma, going to number 2, whatever's in B5, and so you can see I can also type lowercase b, and now you can see B5 is this kind of reddish color, and it's put this reddish box around the number there. So again, you're able to kind of easily tell that the address that you're working with is correct. Comma, for my third number, I want to do B6. Now I have purple, and then comma 7. That one's green. So now you can see these here are all selected. They're all color coded down here. You can see at the end here is a closing parentheses. Always remember to close your parentheses when you're writing formulas. Now I've closed the parentheses. So now my formula, this is my formula here, sum of B4, B5, B6, B7. What this is telling Excel to do is add up the number in these 4 cells and put it into this box. So I'm going to hit enter, and there's my sum, 1,432. So if I highlight these, remember before our earlier thing, and I go look down at my sum down here in the bottom right corner, you can see that says 1432. That lines up. So there's the math that I did. B4, it all adds up to 1432. Now, if you remember, when we did our math over here, I dragged down that box, and it dragged the formula and adjusted it for each row. I can do that same thing down here with this box and my little black cross. If I do this here and drag this across this way, it will also match the sum. It will match that formula. So if I go over here, you can see this now. It says C4, C5, C6, as opposed to B4, B5, B6, B7. And this one over here is D, E, and then F. Now, when I wrote this formula, I wrote out. So let's go. I'm going to go back here to this formula that I wrote, and double click so you can kind of see it here. So it says sum B4, B5, B6, B7. It was fine to write this way because I only had 4 rows. Writing 4 different individual cell addresses was okay. B4, B5, B6, B7. That's fine. But think about what would happen if I was trying to add up a column of 15 numbers, 50 numbers, 500 numbers. I'm not going to sit there and type B4, B5, B6, B30, B65, B237. I'm not going to sit and write those all out. So there has to be a way for me to put a range of cells into a formula. And so let me show you how you can do that. And so yes, there is a way you can put a range of cells into the formula. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here, I'm going to delete the formula that I wrote before. We're going to start again. I'm going to enter in the equals key. Just say that, hey, I'm starting a formula. I'm going to type sum because I'm doing a sum. Open parentheses. So this is how you write all the formulas. And then once again, I have my little guidance down here that's telling me, okay, so now I'm looking for my first number. My first number lives in cell B4. B4. So far, it's the same as when I did the individual cells. Here's where it gets a little bit different. Instead of hitting a comma, like I did before, I'm going to enter a colon. So I'm going to enter the colon there, And so what the colon does is the colon basically starts allowing you to enter in a range of cells. So what you do is you start with the first cell in your range. So my first cell is my top cell here in my column, B4, and then you put the colon, and then on the other side of the colon, you put the last cell in your range. And so usually what happens is you enter the ranges either from the first one on the left to the last one on the right, or the one that's on the top, the one that's on the bottom, but you can also put in a range diagonally. Put in your top left corner, put in your bottom right corner, and it will enter in everything in between. Actually, let me demonstrate. So here, if I wanted to do the column, if I wanted to get the sum of everything that I've entered here, we're going to start with B4 colon down to B7. B7. And now you can see it's dragged this blue box covering up this whole thing. This is down here in blue. Now suppose I wanted to do the row. So I want to go from here to here. I can do B4 to E4. Now you can see now it's done the range from here to here. I was also mentioning I can do diagonally. So if I wanted to do from E4 here, the whole thing all the way down here to E7, I can go in and do E7. And you can see now it just draws a diagonal box from here to here and selects everything that's inside there. So that's the way you can do ranges. Now the interesting thing is I can do, let's do B4 to B7, so I have that there. I can start compounding things. This is where formulas get really kind of tricky and fun in Excel. If I put a comma, you can see now my little tooltip down here has moved from number 1 to number 2. B4 to B7 is now considered by Excel to be a single number. It's number 1. So what it does is it adds it all together and says, okay, this is number 1. So if I wanted to, I could now do C4 to C7. And so what this will do is this will add this, and then add them together. I could also have done B4 to C7, and I would have gotten the same sum. That's just kind of a neat little trick that you can do on there. But the important thing that I'm trying to show here is that the colon allows you to do a range of cells. Close my parentheses, hit enter. There's my 1432. But it does the whole thing. So I didn't have to go and write each individual cell when I did that there. So here, this is still C4, C5, C6, C7. This here is B4 to B7. Now, one of the last things I want to show you about entering formulas here is that you don't need to type in all the cells sometimes. So I'm going to come down here. Actually, we're going to come down into this cell here. You can put formulas into any cells. I could put formula way over here if I wanted to. It doesn't really matter. Excel doesn't care. Though by having things connected, like if I put it here, it allows it kind of connects this number with the rest of the table and allows it to work with that data too. If I start separating it with a line in between, it starts breaking some things that happen in Excel. So we're going to go down here, and what I want to do is I want to do we're going to do another sum equals sum, and now instead of typing in my addresses, I'm going to click on the cell. So I want to do a sum of that and sum of that, and I'm going to do a comma, and now I'm going to do that. I'm going to do a comma, that, comma, and I'm going to do that. And so you can see actually what I'm doing is instead of typing in the addresses, I'm just clicking onto the addresses. So it allows me to instead of having to figure out what the cell addresses are, I can actually click what I want. This also works for ranges. So if I come over here and I drag this across, you can see actually is it automatically writes the range information down here. I didn't have to know B4 to E4 on there. So this seems a little redundant when it comes to working with a small table like this here. This is a small table. We can see everything in one view. We're only dealing with 16 different numbers here. But being able to do this like dragging of ranges becomes really useful when you start dealing with a lot bigger tables. When you're dealing with 500 rows, 200 rows, and maybe 40 columns, when you're dealing with thousands of numbers, sometimes it's just best to be able to click and drag and be able to kind of pull up that range on there. So then I close parentheses just like normal, and there's my sum. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit, give you folks a little bit of time. Go in and put in sums for quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, and then also maybe formulas for the total sales. Let's say about 3 minutes for that there. If you have questions, please ask them in the chat. I'll be here to answer them. Give it a couple more minutes. If you have any questions. Alright, so I don't see any questions. So let's go and do a little bit more practice on formulas by opening up. And I'm going to come here and just show you. Down here, there is a formulas worksheet that you can download from fergusonlibrary.org/online-tech-classes. And then go to Basic Microsoft Excel on the tabs and choose Formula Worksheet. And what that will do is that will open up this file here. It's big and zoom in so that we can see everything. I can see everything, but I want to make sure you can see everything also. So just got a little bit more practice with formulas here. So we have a little bit of a to-do list here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do something that's easy. We're going to add cells A2, A4, A6. So again, remember, we can do that a couple different ways. We're going to do equals sum, because we're adding things together, parentheses, and we could type in those addresses. I could type in A2, A4, A6, close parentheses, or I could do something like A2, colon, A6, and it'll do everything in between. Now, the difference between what I did with, if I typed in them all individually, is that it only chose those specific cells. In fact, actually, let me show you. Let me show you the difference. A2, A4, and A6. There's that. But I could also do equals sum A4 to 6. Oops. A2, A6. There we go. So you can see they're the same thing, but this one here chooses the specific cells. It chooses specifically A2, A4, A6. If I click here, you can see A4, A2, A4, A6. This one, click here, chooses everything. Also these cells in between. So if I go in and type in A5 here, you can see it updates this number here because that's within the range that I entered. So that's where you kind of start thinking about, are you putting in the cells individually, or are you doing a range. With the space in between, since there's only 3 numbers, I would probably go with this formula here, sum A2, A4, A6, rather than doing the range A2 to A6. Okay, so then we have on our to-do list we have B, which is multiply cells B3, B5, and B7. So multiplication uses a different function. It uses the product function. So what I do is I go to equals, and so this is okay. So for example, if I didn't know that product, if I say equals multiply, it's not going to give me anything. There's nothing in multiply. There's nothing there. Suppose I don't. Okay, I want to multiply. I don't know what the function is. How do I figure out what the function is? You can come here to formulas, and if I come here to more functions, where is it? F. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, here we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here to, okay, so I'm going to come here to the formulas tab on my ribbon. I'm going to come over here to the insert function button up here. Click that. And now what happens is I get my little insert function box. And so down here is a list of all the different functions. Go over here and do all, a list of all the functions. There's a lot of functions in Microsoft Excel. But I can also type in, and I can type in multiply. And so what multiply, if I do a search for multiply here, now it will give me the functions that are available that have something to do with multiplication. So there's mProduct, which returns the product of 1 to 255 complex numbers. There's mmult, which returns the matrix product of 2 arrays. Don't worry about these things. Then we have product here. Multiplies all the numbers given as arguments. This is very similar to the sum that we're using, except the sum adds together. So you can see, actually, if I do here, if I do search for multiplies, go, it just gives me D product and product. So product is the one that I want. I'm going to hit OK. And we're getting into a lot of this is a little kind of fancier way of doing functions. What's important right now is just learning that I want the product functions. I'm going to do equals product, open parentheses, and once again it's looking for different numbers. And so I can do just what I did with the sum. I'm going to do B3, B5, B7, close, and enter. And so now I have multiplied these 3 numbers together. So then we have our third option here, which is divide cells C2, C5, C8. Division is a little different. Go. There are only 2 different functions that come up when it comes to division. Divide. Yeah, so there is there's quotient, which is the integer part of the division. So what that basically means is that if I divide like 5, if I divide 6 by 3, like if I get the answer 2. It's a single integer. There's no decimal place, it's just 2. But if I divide 7 by 2, let's do 7 by 2, I get 3.5. If I did this quotient function, I'd only get, the answer would only be 3. It would cut off the decimal place. Mod gives the remainder. So what would happen is I divide 7 by 2, I would get 3, and the remainder would be 1. There would be 1 unit left over. So what mod would give me would be 1. Not exactly kind of what we're looking for in this case. So division you actually write a little bit differently. I can actually do equals, and I can actually do C2 slash to divide C5 slash C8. Now this is also a little complicated because now does it divide C2 and C5 first and then divide all of that by C8, or does it divide C5 and C8 and then divide C2 by that number there? Order of operations basically says that it'll do C2, C5, and then it'll take whatever the result of this is and divide that by C8. I can rewrite how that works by doing things like parentheses. So like C5 divided by, or C2 divided by C5 divided by C8. What this means is it will divide this first and then divide C2 by the rest of these. So just kind of different ways. It's the order of operations for math go through. But oops. Go to that. We're going to do that, hit enter, and we get 0.093651. Hey, you know what I'm going to do? I am going to see if that's right. I know I shouldn't doubt Excel, but let's find out. So we're going to do 118 divide by 45 divide by 0.09365, and then it rounds off this last one here, 51. So you can see this formula here is written a little bit different. Interesting enough, the way this is written here, let me double click so you can kind of see that there's such. You can also do with sums and products. Like for example, my sum here of A2, A4, I can do A2 plus A4 plus A6, enter, and it's still going to do the math. It's just that sum has been kind of like the classic formula that you use for doing addition in Excel, and plus if you use the sum, it allows Excel to use some different kind of tools and or it allows Excel to know better what that number is rather than just a mathematical kind of thing. Multiplication, I could do equals B3 times B5 times B7, and I still get the same number. There just isn't a sum or product that's for division or subtraction. So we have our final step here, which is subtract D1, D2, and D4. So we're going to do equals D1 minus D2 minus D4. And once again, order of operations, it will always work left to right, so it's going to subtract 5 from 100 first, and then it's going to subtract 4 from 95. So we should get an answer of 91. There we go. If instead I wrote something like this, what this will do is this will subtract D2 from D4. So we'll subtract 4 from 5, the answer 1, and then subtract that from 100. So we should get 99. So parentheses allows you to change the order of operations. Otherwise, it's going to work left to right. And now I'm teaching a remedial math class. Good job, me. Okay, so there. So yeah, so you can use the proper equals, like for multiplication, product, the proper function names, or you can actually just do it for simple math. You can then just do the mathematical operators here. Slashes for division, dashes for subtract, asterisks for multiply, and plus signs for addition. So that has been formulas. It's a rough and dirty look at writing formulas. Some ways a little bit sloppy how I did things here, but the best thing to do is get in practice, learn the functions that you need to use frequently, and kind of get used to kind of the quirks and how they're written, how to enter in data to make the most use of the functions you do. Like with anything, it all comes down to practice. That said, we have one more thing to go into class. I'm going to give a couple of minutes if you want to open up the formulas practice Excel sheet and kind of do these here and such. Let me say about 4 minutes, and then we'll go and look at how to create charts or graphs using the data that we've done in our other spreadsheet. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll be right here. really seeing any questions. Let me give another couple of minutes for entering in, playing around with the data in the files. If you need me to repeat anything, let me know. People are playing around with formulas. I'm just gonna be back. I'll be back in just a second. Alright, so I'm back. Sorry about that. And let's jump into now playing with charts. So if you've been working in the formulas practice file, you can close it, save it or don't save it. It's up to you. And now we are back to our Big W supermarket sales. So creating graphs, I'm going to actually just kind of clean up my data here, just a little bit of that extra thing in there. So in order to start creating graphs, first you have to have data entered. So we've entered in the data here. We have our columns listed, we have our rows listed, and we have our data entered in here. In this case, we also have different totals as well too. And actually, before I get into charts a bit, we have some time. I have about 25 minutes left in this class. I also just want to show you a little bit of things about formatting the data to kind of make your spreadsheets look a little bit prettier. So, for example, right now, all of these cells here all look the same. It's all the same numbers, and sometimes you want to make things kind of stand out to make your table easier to read. So, some things you can do is we can change the fonts. So, just like you're working in Microsoft Word, I can go in, I can select the cell here. So, we're going to choose the cell that says product here at A3, and I'm going to click bold. And I'm going to do is make that stand. And so now, if I click out, you can see now. This here stands out a little bit bolder. I can do the same thing with my quarters here, total sales. Let's do all of these here. I'm going to make them bold. Now they stand out a bit from the number that's underneath. I can do the same thing here with my totals. So we're going to make that bold to kind of tell that, hey, these numbers are a bit different than the ones that are entered here. Now all of a sudden, everything's still black and white. All I did was make things bold. But now all of a sudden, things stand out a bit more when we're looking at this here. But you can actually make things stand out more if you wanted to I like to use color. I'm a big fan of using color in my spreadsheets for variety of just basically making things easier. So we have our top layer here, which is the labels, or what they call the column names or column labels. And I'm going to come up here, and there's these two little colored buttons here on the ribbon under the font section here. This one over here is the fill color. What that means is this is the background color of the cell. You can see the tooltip that comes up says color the background of cells to make them stand out. The one over here is the font color. So this is the actual color of the text. So I usually like to come over here to fill. And if I click on, you can see actually like many different tools on the ribbon. You can see if I move my mouse back and forth, there's actually two buttons here. There's the one with the paint can and the yellow. And if I click that there, it will make this all yellow because that's the color that's currently selected. But right next to it is this little downward pointing arrow. And what this little downward pointing arrow indicates to me is that it indicates to me that there is a menu of options, that if I click on this, I'll be able to select a different color than just the yellow that's currently set there. And so what happens is we have a bunch of different theme colors. These theme colors here will change based on the theme that you've chosen for your spreadsheet. Themes are outside of the scope of this class, but it's just something these can change based on another setting that you can do elsewhere. There's also the standard colors. These are always the same. So what I can do is I can choose, say, something like this light green, and I can do this here. And now what I've done now is I've now made my column heading bar over here green. So it kind of stands out. I can do the same thing over here. Actually, you know what? Let's do, okay, so, but we can also play around with different things. So like apples, if I go apples across, and apples are generally red, right? Yeah. Actually, I don't have red up here. I can make them red. You know, let's just go with the standard colors. We're gonna make this here. So we're gonna go, I'm usually used to seeing kind of red as one of my theme colors here, or a reddish thing as my theme colors, but not seeing it this time. So we're gonna go here and we're gonna choose red. So now you can see I have that red going across. Yeah, we'll keep it as red. I wanted to, okay, so now grapes. Grapes are often purple. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go choose purple. Now you can see actually when I choose the purple here, the black font is a little bit harder to read. So I can always go in and I can change my font color to a color that would be easier to read. So like I could go with white. White's easier to read against. So that just kind of makes it a little bit more readable. Oranges. What color are we going to make the oranges? That's right. We're going to make them green now. We're going to make them orange. Because that's what you do with oranges. Use orange. And then pears. Pears are often a color. So we'll go with the darker. Actually, you know what we're going to do? I'm going to make this up here darker. I'm spending way too much time with this here. I know. But just kind of showing you that you can kind of like color code your thing to make things a little bit easier. And this one here is going to be this lighter green. There we go. And so now I look at this here, and now I can easily read, here's my apples going across, here's my sales for the apples, here's my sales for the grapes. And everything kind of pops and is a little bit more visual. So you can kind of play around with the format, and you can change the font, change the size of the text in there, change the color, make it bold, underline. You can do all those kind of things with it there and such to kind of make your tables look pretty and presentable. The last thing I just want to show you about the ribbon is I showed you the difference between the two different buttons, and you can see that shows up in different places. Like the Merge and Center has its own little downward pointing arrow over here. Over here, like the Insert has the button, and then down below it has the menu that if I click that. The other thing to pay attention to on the ribbon is if you look down in the bottom right of each of these sections, there is this little arrowed icon here. And what this does is this is kind of like an expansion icon that tells you, hey, there are expanded options for font. So these are like the most common font settings that you'll use when you're editing the text in Microsoft Office or Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Word. This little font section is actually the same, pretty much the same in both programs. But if I click this, it will open up the Format Cells box. And here, I have a bunch of different kind of font options. I have all my fonts here. This is the same as I get from the drop down over here. Size is the same as I get over there. Here's regular, italic, bold, bold, italic. I have things, but I can do things like straight throughs or superscripts here. Underlines. I can change the color. Then I can do things like I can do the borders. The fill. Here's the fill colors. So the font this here gives me a little bit more kind of alignment. all the stuff that's available here is opened up inside that. So whenever you're looking for a specific setting on the ribbon, look for this little expansion thing. If you can't find it on the ribbon, this little expansion thing, it might be hidden behind in a menu there. Enough of that. We've talked about kind of formatting, making things pretty. Let's look at charts. So what I want to do is I'm going to highlight all of my data here. I'm actually not going to highlight my totals because they're going to throw off my graph right now. I just want to see the actual individual sales. We could maybe make a graph of just the total sales also. But right now, I want to see how the sales of the individual products went. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight, and you're noticing I'm highlighting my top row here with the heading here and such, because what that does is that gives some labels. That helps Excel figure out some labels for the chart. Highlight here. So we have labels up there, and we have labels over there. I'm going to go over to the Insert tab on my ribbon up here. And we're going to come over here and we're going into the chart section. And now you can see there's a variety of different charts that are available. There are column or bar charts. There are hierarchy charts. There are pie charts. There are line charts that are available. So in this case, we want to maybe see a bar chart. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to click the bar chart, and we can either do 2D columns, 3D columns. We're going to do something simple. A nice simple 2D column. And I'm going to click this here, and it creates the chart right here. It's sitting on top of my data. I can actually click, drag, and move it over to the side if I want to. So now I can see them both next to each other. And now you can see down here is it has quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. And here's my comparisons between apples, grapes, oranges, and pears. And so I didn't have to do a lot of work. I selected the data I wanted, and it then built the chart for me. You'll notice that once I've made the chart, up here on the ribbon, there's two new kind of little items up here. There's chart design, which gives me kind of all my design options for the chart. So I can do things like colors and themes. Like, for example, if I want to have a dark background on there, or if I wanted to do kind of different ways of presenting the axis or the bars on there. Like if I want to have these like little lines going on, it shows up on that screen. This here will actually go through and actually show you the numbers at the ends. But yeah, so you can actually change, and if I open this up, you can see there's a bunch of different kind of options that you can kind of go with on there. But I can also do things like if I come up here and click on the chart title, I can give it a chart title. We can say this is Big W Supermarket Sales. I can change the colors if I wanted to. I can add elements. So for example, there's a whole bunch of things, the axes, titles. So now I can actually, let's say, because remember when you're dealing with graphs, you always want to label your axes, primary, vertical, and this is unit. No, we're going to call this unit sales. Come on, select the whole thing. There we go. Unit sales. But now when somebody's looking at this here, they know what these numbers up here mean. I can add things like data label, or so data labels. Let's put them outside end. So now I can actually put the numbers there again. So somebody who's taking a quick look at this chart, they can then see the numbers there if they don't have the table over here to compare it to. Let's see, I can come over here if I wanted to, and I change this to the red. Oops, that was the red. I can go in and what did you change? There we go. So I can go in and I can make these match up to the I can make them match up to their colors on my thing over here if I wanted to. Got our orange. Here's to the right colored green. There we go. And you can see it's updated my key down here too. So there's a lot of smart things going on in Excel when you make a chart. Let's do another chart. So I'm going to highlight the same data and just kind of see what it looks like when I choose a line chart. Let's do this one here. There we go. And so you can see this is so different kind of ways in this chart. Let me put this. We'll scroll down when we need it. In this chart here, we have kind of a good comparison between the different types of fruit, and we can also easily compare between the different quarters. So like if I'm just looking at apples, it's really easy to compare apples for quarter 1 to apples to quarter 2. They're actually very close, whereas apples to quarter 3 was a little bit higher, and then we have quarter 4 is a bit higher here. So I can either compare within the quarter, or I can compare the individual fruits. I could make, if I wanted to, I could make a chart that just shows apples for the quarters like that. So if I do something like this and bar chart and do that, I can then just see, here's my apple sales. So you can see it's easy to, not easy, it's, you can quickly create different types of chart and different type of data. Sometimes you have to kind of manipulate around, like these ones here are coming out actually really straightforward without a lot of work. This line chart here is a little bit more difficult to read than this one here, but what it does is it kind of shows me over time how the sales of the different fruits are going. So you can see like apples had a little bit of a dip, and then it kind of has gone up. Grapes has largely remained steady, a little bit of increase. Oranges had a good increase throughout the year on there. So you can start seeing how to read the chart and kind of what it presents in that case. But you can do a bunch of different kind of fun things. Oh, I forgot, there's the format tab here over here, which are then able to do things like add different shapes and do a bunch of different. My suggestion, go in, and what it is the format of the chart itself. So if I resize the chart, you can see it changes the height and width over here. What it does with the border, because this whole thing here is its own little object that I can then move around where I need it to do. Or I can take this and move it off to Microsoft Word or Microsoft PowerPoint if I'm doing a presentation. We have a class that I'll be offering in October that will work with how Excel works with like PowerPoint and Microsoft Word. But that's not covered right now. So this is kind of with charts. And there's just a variety of different kind of charts that are available. Let me get this out of the way. Move over there. But yeah, so there's just like a fun, they're fun to play around. I can do a scatter plot. One of the nice things later versions of Excel has is it has this recommended charts that when I click on this, what it does is it uses its knowledge to kind of say, okay, these are the recommended types of charts that work, and it kind of give you an explanation about when to use that certain column. So the first one that I created over here, this one, had them all separated by quarter. This one here, this clustered column, so we have two different clustered columns that is giving us. It's either here, separated by quarters, so we can compare quarter sales between the different fruits, or we have it separated by fruit, and each bar represents the quarter. So what happens is you can see within the fruit how it changed from quarter to quarter. So different ways of presenting the data and viewing it in different ways. And so it's always one of kind of the things to think about when you look at a chart or you're deciding how you're going to present your data. Think about what information do you want your readers to get from the data that you're presenting? Are you looking at, do you want them to compare between the different types of fruit? In this case here, we look at this here and we can say apples are more popular than all the other types of fruit, but oranges are more popular than pears, but less popular than the other ones. So you're able to tell the popularity of different types of fruit here. So that would be kind of what I'm presenting with this chart. If I look at this one here, boop, we have that. Okay, so we have that, and we have I'm going to get rid of my line chart because the line chart's kind of useless. And we're going to put these side by side, and I can talk about them better that way. Nope, I did not want to do that. There we go. And let's make you a little smaller. And make you both about the same size. Yeah, that's cool stuff. Okay, so what was I saying? How I'm presenting the data. This one here is looking at the popularity of the fruit each quarter. So again, I can see in comparing the fruit with each other. This one here is comparing the quarters with each other within the fruit. So I can look at apples and say, okay, quarter 4 has been a better apple sale period than quarter 1 was. Quarter 3 for grapes was better than quarter 2, but not as good as quarter 4. So you can see, based on how I'm reading the chart, I get different pieces of information from there. I'm presenting the data in different ways and getting a different analysis. What this tells me is that Big W supermarket sales, I mistyped that, Big Market supermarket sales, generally needs to keep a good supply of apples because they are always popular compared to the other fruits. In fact, they should be having, apples should have a larger display section within Big W supermarket sales. This one over here tells me that, hey, in quarter 4, we should plan to be buying more apples than we did in the earlier quarters because there's a higher demand for them. So you choose the chart and the design of the chart based on the information that you want to present, the story that you want to tell with your data. The charts are, whereas in our data, we have our straightforward data over here in a table that most people can just go through and kind of try. I mean, people who are used to reading data can kind of look through this here and kind of get a sense of what the different trends and things are going. But it really strikes home when you put it into like a visual form. And for some people, they need this visual form to really understand. They look at this here and it's just a collection of different numbers. Whereas they look at this here and you can start seeing the different trends that are going on. So that's charts. I do recommend just going in and playing around with it. It's the name of the game is just get in and play around with it and just get comfortable with these tools in a low stress, low impact environment. Take our Big W supermarket sales here, play around with writing different formulas with them, play around with formatting text, play around with making different charts of that there, rearrange the data, see how it affects things. Like, for example, if I come over here and we make this 600, you can see actually it automatically changes the chart over there, it changes my sales over here. So you're able to kind of dynamically play around with things over here and see how it affects other parts of your of the data presentation that you're doing. The last thing I just want to kind of talk about here is that if you have enjoyed this class and you want us to continue offering these kind of things here, please go to this address here, www.projectoutcome.org/responses/52157. This link is also available. I'm going to put the link back up in a second, but this link is also available on the fergusonlibrary.org/online-tech-classes. This survey link right down here will take you out to the survey as well too. If I click on that there, wait for it to open, it'll kind of just a nice brief survey. It's going to take you 20-30 seconds to fill out, but I would highly appreciate it if you do fill it out on there. So let me actually go back to the survey link so you can see the survey link. Coming up with classes, we have next Tuesday, August 18th, from 7 to 9, I am doing an Introduction to Microsoft PowerPoint, which is our basic PowerPoint class. Thursday, August 20th, I am going to be doing, here, this back here, and so August 20th we'll be doing online learning resources from the Ferguson Library, in which I'm going to be going over a bunch of kind of just the different ways that you can kind of learn and expand and continue your learning using tools brought to you by the Ferguson Library. And then Tuesday, August 25th, if you want to learn how to do live stream like what I've been doing tonight, using the free OBS software, I will be going through how to set up OBS, how to download OBS, how to set it up, to do a live stream, the different things you need to know for the different platforms, whether you're doing Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and some of the equipment that you may need to do a live stream. So with all of that, I'm going to show you the survey once more. Please go complete the survey. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. I'll be here for about another 5 minutes. And then we will... and that'll be it. I hope to see you next Tuesday for Microsoft PowerPoint. For that, this has been Frank Skornia with the Ferguson Library online technology classes and Introduction to Microsoft Excel tonight. Thank you for anybody who attended, and have a good evening. And if there aren't any questions within or so, it will. I'll just be ending. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat, so thank you for anybody who attended. I hope you have a good night, and hope to see you Tuesday. Hope everyone stays well and safe. Good night.